Welcome. Take a slow, deep breath and let it go. Wherever you are, whatever the day has held, this is your time to rest. To let your mind drift softly into the still waters of the past. Tonight, we return once more to the frost-covered coasts and quiet fjords of the Viking world, not to witness their raids or trade or ships, but to explore something quieter, deeper, something that lingered in every home, every firelight conversation, and every silent forest path. We'll be exploring what the Vikings believed about death, not with fear, not with drama, but gently, curiously. From the moment a child first learned what it meant to die, to the solemn rites of a funeral by torchlight, to the sprawling myths of what lay beyond the veil, this was a culture that lived with death, intimately. In this journey, you'll hear of quiet rituals and grand tales, barrows and burning ships, of silent hills and whispered prayers, and of what it meant, truly, to leave this world in the eyes of a Norse heart. So settle in. Let the soft crackle of imagined firewood and the rhythm of slow ancient footsteps guide you as we begin. Imagine yourself standing in the smoky warmth of a Viking longhouse. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and dried herbs, juniper, sage, and the faint temps of old hay. Outside, the cold wind howls, bending the trees like old men huddled against time. Inside, there is quiet conversation, calm, hushed. Perhaps someone has died, or perhaps someone is dying. In the Viking world, death was not something hidden away. It was part of the rhythm of life. Like the changing seasons, like childbirth, like the harvest. Children saw it. Elders spoke of it. Warriors prepared for it. Farmers accepted it. Aging was often swift. Illness could strike without warning. Accidents on farms, at sea, or in battle were common. Yet there was no sense of panic, no rush to preserve youth or deny what was to come. Instead, there were customs, simple ones, tender ones. If someone was dying, their bed might be turned to face the door so their spirit could find its way out easily. A family member might whisper old stories in their ear to remind them of their place in the great line of ancestors. Children were taught to be still and respectful, not afraid, just quiet, watching, learning. There might be a bowl of water nearby so the spirit could wash its face before leaving. There might be a coin, too. A quiet nod to myths about paying for passage across distant rivers. But more often, there was warmth. A fire burning low, a dog resting at someone's feet, a woman humming softly as she stirred a pot of barley. You see, the Vikings did not see death as an ending, not in the way we often do today. It was a passing, a crossing, from one place to another. And so, it was treated with a certain quiet reverence, neither feared nor celebrated, simply expected. In some homes, the dead were washed by family members. The task was somber, but it was done with care. The body would be wrapped perhaps in wool or linen and laid out for visitors to pay respects. This was a moment of reflection, not performance. There were no grand speeches, just nods, silent tears. Perhaps a shared drink in memory. Then when it came time to bury or burn the body, the community gathered. Not because they were commanded to, but because they always had. It was what you did. They would bring offerings, tools, jewelry, sometimes food. Not because the dead needed them exactly, but because such things reminded the living of who that person had been. And in many homes, especially among farmers and smallholders, the dead stayed close, buried behind the house. Under the garden, beside the hearth, the ancestors were not gone. They were here, in the soil, in the stones, in the whisper of wind that passed through the grass at night. Many believed that the dead could watch, could visit in dreams, could bring warning or blessing depending on how they had been treated. In life and in death, that's why rituals mattered, because they weren't just about honoring the dead. They were about keeping peace with those who had crossed over. As you sit quietly, picturing these ancient practices, you begin to notice something. Death was not a disruption to the Viking way of life. It was part of the rhythm, like tending sheep, like mending boots, like gathering wood before the frost. A constant presence, rarely welcome, but never entirely feared. And perhaps, in the hush of a firelit hall, you can understand why. Now, let the longhouse fade. The hum of everyday life dissolves into silence, and imagine instead a hill. A quiet rise above a gray fjord. Sky is heavy with the pale gold of an early northern morning, and the earth is still. This is where the people have gathered, dozens, maybe hundreds. Men with cloaks drawn tight against the wind, women with hands folded and faces solemn, children clinging to their mothers' hems, quiet but alert. They've come for a burial, a great one, a chieftain. Old and respected, has died, and now tradition must be followed. It begins not with fire, but with preparation. For days the body was tended, washed, dressed in fine clothes, a fur-lined cloak, perhaps, or a tunic dyed with precious madder root. His weapons were placed beside him, his sword, once sharp, now dulled, for it would not be drawn again. Jewelry, arm rings, beads, brooches were chosen carefully. Some would be sent with him, others passed to the heirs, and then the ship. Ah yes, the Viking ship funeral. Iconic, mythic, but also real. Though not every Viking was buried this way, those of high-rank jarls, chieftains, or honored warriors might be granted such an end. The ship rests inland, pulled from the sea, and laid on logs. Around it, a burial mound will soon rise, a tomb of soil and stone to shelter this final voyage. The body is placed on a bed of straw and animal pelts. He lies surrounded by goods for the afterlife: tools, weapons, cooking pots. Sometimes even horses or dogs are sacrificed and laid beside him, their spirits to accompany his own. At times, though more rarely than legend claims, human servants were also buried with the dead. Women, often chosen or volunteered, believing they would follow their lord into the next world. But today, perhaps, it is only him and his ship. The priest, if one is present, murmurs words from an older tongue, or perhaps the eldest son speaks, steady but quiet, recounting the deeds of his father, the battles won, the winters survived, the laws upheld. A horn sounds, low, melancholy. Then torches are brought forward. Some Viking ships were burned, the fire consuming the vessel and soul alike. Others were buried beneath great earthen mounds. The choice varied by region, wealth, and custom. Let us say this one will burn. The wood crackles and spits as flames rise, not wild or violent, but controlled. A sacred fire. Smoke spirals toward the gray sky as the ship begins its final journey. not across the sea, but into memory. Onlookers stand still, the fire reflected in their eyes. No one speaks. Not yet. Only when the flames have faded and the last ember dies do they turn. Back to the village. Back to life.
The place where the ship burned may later become a mound. Quiet hill.
Grasses will grow. Sheep may wander. The people will remember. And children will point and say, that's where the old Jarl lies. This, too, was the Viking way of death. A ceremony not just for the dead, but for the living. To mark the moment. To pass the torch. And to whisper, one more ancestor joins the line. Now that we've witnessed the death of a Viking chieftain and the solemn rituals that followed, let us close our eyes and drift even further, not back into the world of the living, but into the mysterious realm that awaited beyond the grave. What did the Vikings believe happened after death? The answer is not simple. For the Norse view of the afterlife was not one unified idea. It was a mosaic, woven from myth, clan lore, oral traditions, and local beliefs. Each region, each family, each storyteller might shape the journey differently. But among these varied views, some destinations stand out. Perhaps the most well-known is Valhalla. Imagine a great golden hall, its roof made of shining shields, its rafters supported by spears, its gates tall enough to admit giants. Here, the bravest of warriors, those who died with honor in battle, were said to feast and fight forever, not in torment, but in eternal glory. Each day they would rise, pick up their weapons, and spar with one another. Each evening, their wounds would vanish, and they would gather around roaring fires to drink mead from the skulls of enemies long past. This was not heaven as we know it. It was not peace. It was purpose. A place for warriors to prepare for the final battle. Ragnarok, the end of days. But not everyone dreamed of Valhalla. Not everyone fought with sword in hand. Not everyone who died went to the Hall of Odin. Some were chosen by Freya, goddess of love, fertility, and battle. Her realm was a field of the fallen, lush, peaceful, and beautiful. It is said that Freya received half of those slain in battle, a quiet counterpart to the thunder of Valhalla. Her hall was gentle. There were no daily duels here, just a final resting place under open skies. For those who valued gentleness, for those whose lives ended without fanfare, may have offered a more comforting welcome. But what of those who died of sickness? Of old age, of accident, or sorrow? They did not go to Valhalla. They were not chosen by Freya. They went to hell, not the fiery hell of later Christian lore, but a realm of shadows, cold and gray, ruled by the goddess Hel, daughter of Loki. Imagine a place beneath roots and stone, a land of fog and silence, where souls wandered not in torment, but in quiet forgetfulness. Hel was not evil. She simply was. Necessary. Unyielding. A reflection of death in its most ordinary form. And while some feared her domain, others may have found peace in its stillness. Still others believed in returning as spirits bound to the land. A restless draugr, a ghost that lingered. Or a helpful ancestor, watching over kin. Some tales whispered of Ran, the sea goddess who drowned sailors and kept their souls in her net. Or Jaegr, her husband, whose underwater halls welcomed the drowned with music and foam. The afterlife, for Vikings, was not always reward or punishment, was a continuation, a reflection, a becoming. And it was shaped not just by how you died, but by how you lived, who remembered you. and who sang your name after you were gone. So far, we've wandered through the beliefs that shaped the Viking afterlife, from the golden halls of Valhalla to the quiet shadows of hell. Now let's return once more to the realm of the living, to the final rituals, to the farewell. But this time, let's look not just at what the Vikings believed, but at how those beliefs were expressed, differently depending on your place in the world. Because while death came for all, it did not come equally. Imagine a Viking king has died, not in battle, but in old age. The sea wind no longer wakes him at dawn. His longhouse falls silent. Preparations begin immediately. Ship is chosen, sometimes full-sized, sometimes a symbolic carving. It is drawn onto land or built where the waves kiss the sand. The king's body is washed, combed, dressed in fine linen or wool. Jewelry is placed upon him, brooches, rings, perhaps the sword he once carried. His dogs may be brought too, or his horses, not just companions in life, but escorts in death. Sometimes his wife, concubine, or a slave was sacrificed, their lives taken so that they might follow their master into the next world. Then the fire is lit. The flames rise. The smoke spirals into the sky, carrying soul and story upward. The people gather not just to mourn, but to drink, to feast, to remember. This is not quiet sorrow. This is a spectacle, declaration of power, even in death. And when all is ash, stones are raised to mark the place, a memory etched into earth. Imagine not a king, but a farmer. He has lived in the same longhouse his whole life, worked the same soil, known the same sheep by name. When he dies, the ritual is humbler. No ship, no feast, just family. His body is wrapped in a simple shroud. A hole is dug, not too deep, sometimes marked with stones, sometimes left unmarked altogether. Few trinkets are buried with him, perhaps a tool or a wooden comb, something useful, something familiar. The children cry. The animals graze nearby, indifferent. The wife stands quietly. She has seen this before. Maybe they speak his name aloud. Maybe they don't. The rhythm of life continues. For those who remain, there is no gold, no fire, no songs carried by the wind, but still, he is remembered in the way the plow cuts the field, in the stories whispered near the hearth, in the faces of grandchildren who never knew his voice. Some died at sea, lost to storms, swallowed by waves. There was no ritual for them, only silence, and maybe if they were lucky, a carving on wood. A name remembered by someone on land. Others were buried in boats, laid inside mounds of earth. Still others in cremation pits, turned to ash and carried by the wind. And some were laid beneath churches when the old gods faded. But always, always, the living made sense of the dead in whatever way they could. Death, to the Vikings, was not the end. It was simply the next step, continuation of honor, duty, or peace. But the way it was marked, the songs that were sung, the things left behind in earth or flame, these depended not just on belief, but on status, wealth, gender, and place. Even in death, the social order held its shape. And yet beneath it all, every Viking, king, or peasant knew that death was a certainty, that what mattered most is how you lived before it arrived, and that perhaps something we still carry with us. And now, as our journey through Viking beliefs and farewells comes to a quiet end, you can feel the hush settle in. The hearth has gone quiet. The oars have stopped. The final stone has been laid on the mound. The wind off the fjord still whispers, but it carries no battle cries tonight. Only memory. Only peace. You've walked the frozen soil where slaves once toiled, watched ships burn to honor kings, heard the soft songs of women preparing for burial rites, and felt the silence of those lost to the sea. These stories, though buried in time, still live in the patterns of the stars, in the quiet pool of the moon over water, in the way every goodbye is really a kind of beginning. The Vikings saw death not as darkness, but as a continuation, a thread in a larger tapestry. Perhaps you can feel that thread now, gently tugging at you. It's pulling you back from history, back into rest. Let your breath slow, let your thoughts soften. You are no longer rowing, no longer watching flames or lifting stones. You are simply drifting. May your sleep be like the quiet fjord after sunset, still deep and untroubled. Thank you for joining this journey through time. You are safe now. You are home. Good night.